So let's talk about contacting, connecting, and keeping. I mentioned to you just a minute ago that I love the movies, Toy Stories, and how, even with all their distractions and life changes, how they kept community. They kept people together. They looked for people. You remember when Woody got lost and then Buzz, I think, got lost one time. And then the little girl with the little Bo Peep, she got lost. And they didn't like the fact that they would lose their family, their community. But they also had to adjust because the little boy that owned Woody grew up. And then the little sister grew up. And so they knew that it changes, and we have to be willing to adjust to the changes. We can't become what's called a holy huddle and just think this is just my little group and I don't want anything to change. I want everything to stay the same because I know all these people. But that's not what God has called us to do. There are times when we do Bible studies and classes where it is inward focus only. It is where you are just putting together a group of people like a divorce care or a grief share or, a celebrate recovery, where you want the same people every week because you're trying to minister to those people. And it's a closed group for a reason. But the majority of our ministries, the majority of our groups need to always be outward focus. And that's what I I loved about the movie. Now, all of you that are watching this, I don't know what your background is, and maybe some of you are single, some of you are married, some of you leading, maybe some of you are on staff, pastoring. It all doesn't matter because we're all a part of a group of some kind. So we're going to get into a little bit more about, how do we contact people, how do we connect to them, and how do we keep them? So one of the questions I want to ask you is, do you remember your first day of school? Do you remember when you were the first one there, or maybe you moved, or maybe you're the first person at a new job, and you moved, and how that felt? How did that feel? Did you feel good? Were you excited? Were you nervous? Did you not know what to expect? Well, when you're married and you come into a new group, you come into a new class, you have that person beside you that kind of, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know about that. You're kind of like, and they're your support. But when you're by yourself and you're coming, there is no support. You kind of walk in, you kind of look, and you're looking for people that look like you. You're looking for someone that maybe will say hello to you or come over here and sit with me. It's very scary. And so remember back, if you can, being that person and what it felt like. And that'll help you as we go through the night and we talk about the different parts of this, to remember what it felt like for yourself. Remember, a lot of our classes, I've noticed over the years, I've visited lots of Sunday school classes and small groups over the years. Some of them have a lot of people coming, but then they don't come back. We don't know why, but I could probably tell you why. Some of them have great teachers. They're awesome teachers. Everybody loves the teacher, but they're terrible at follow-up. They're terrible at relationships. And then some are all relational. We're just buddies. We just love you and just come on. But the teaching is like, ugh. How can we have a balance of all of it? How can we have a good teacher that cares about the people there, even if the teacher's married, even if the teacher doesn't completely understand singleness? How can we have a teacher that cares about the people around you? And then how do you have people that care also about the people around you? This is some of the challenges that we have today. There are 3 reasons why people do not come back to our churches. They don't come back to our small groups, our classrooms. 1, they came for a handout, and you got tired of handing out. They're always in need. They go from church to church to church looking for free anything. They want free money. They want somebody to help them in their house. They never want to give back. It's always them needing something. And at some point in time, you get tired as a ministry of giving and giving and giving. And you realize this person is not really wanting to change. They're just taking advantage of you. Another reason why somebody won't come back is it's just not where God wants them. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not about you. It's not about the teaching. It's not about follow-up. Just isn't where God wants them. And then the third reason is they didn't feel welcomed. They didn't feel loved. They didn't feel included. They didn't feel like they belonged because we didn't do something right. We forgot to do something. And that's what we're going to talk about. Remember, every class that we're in, every small group we're in, the whole purpose of it is to grow people, to connect them to Christ and to connect them to each other. Our purpose in the life is the same, whether you're single or married. Our purpose is a relationship with the Lord that glorifies him, and have that relationship, a relationship with others to bring him to Christ. So whether you go to a First Baptist or Third Baptist, You know, whether you're in this denomination or that denomination, whether you are a doctor or you work at a grocery store, whether you're retired or you're 20 and in college, it doesn't change. Your purpose doesn't change. It's just the direction and where God has placed you in order to work out that purpose. So when we keep that mindset in our small groups, in our Bible studies, in our ministries, we keep that mindset that, wow, the whole reason we're here is to connect people to God and to each other. Maybe I've gotten off track. Maybe our group has kind of gone the wrong direction. Maybe we're more about socials and everybody having fun than we are about the Word of God. Or maybe we're too much about the Word of God and we forgot about the relationships. We forgot about the friendships. Or maybe we're all about one person who's in charge and there's no team. There's no leadership team. And the group never grows because there's only one person and they can't do it all. Something to think about. One of the biggest challenges that I find in Sunday school and small group development is a lack of prayer. Are we really praying daily for who God wants us to reach? Are we praying for who God wants us to follow up with? Are we praying for who God wants us to help lead the ministry? So the first word we're going to look at is contacting. This is of the three words: contacting, connecting, and keeping. This is that first contacting point and outside the church, let's say. This is that person that you might meet at the drugstore, someone you might meet at the dry cleaner, somebody, if you have kids, you might be, kid plays or is in the same classroom as your kid. It might be your neighbor. It's anybody that you have that initial contact for the purpose of bringing them to church, for the purpose of leading them to the Lord, for the purpose of bringing them into your group, your ministry. That first connection that you have, well, the greatest way for that to happen is to have something in common. Proverbs 22:2 says, rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. Obviously, other places, the gym, sporting events, a Mary Kay party, a block party, walking, hiking. These are all ways that we can connect with people for the purpose of getting to know them, building a relationship, and inviting them to our churches, inviting them to our Sunday school classes. But what's key that helps it is to have something in common, to start the conversation of beginning to see what you have, a common interest that creates the conversation that can then build a relationship and also allow you to invite them. Be prepared when you are doing this. One of the biggest mistakes we make is that we'll be at a restaurant and we'll witness to the waitress. You know, I love to say to the server, we're getting ready to thank God for our meal. Is there something that we can pray for you? And inevitably they're like, yeah, pray for my mom or pray for my dog or pray for my kid or whatever. And we go, that's wonderful. And then that's it. I've made the same mistake. And we don't invite them to our churches, or we invite them on a Sunday right after church. And they're like, well, do you want me to serve you at your meal after church? Or do you want me to come to your church? But we don't ever have anything to give them. And even if we do give them something, we don't get their information. So how are you going to follow up with them? I promise you, most people, when you give them a business card of the church or a brochure of the church, they're less likely to contact you without a personal connection. So by just giving someone a brochure or a bulletin is not enough, unless they're seeking, unless they're like, well, I've been looking for churches and I'm going to come. But again, we're trying to get them into our class. That's what the whole purpose of tonight's talk is. We want to get them into our ministries, into our Sunday school classes. So inviting somebody just to your church, and you may never see them again. So to me, what's important is to be ready. Be ready when we go out. Be ready and be intentional about when you go out. So every morning you pray and say, Lord, who am I going to come into contact with? Who can I start a conversation with? Maybe it's somebody I already know, somebody that's in my family, somebody that's a friend. Maybe it's already my neighbor, but help me, Lord, to have what I need to give them to let them know more about the ministry. But then I need to get their information and say, hey, can I get your phone number? I'll give you a call. Do you need a ride? And here's another thing that's really important, is finding out enough about them, a little bit about them, that you might be able to connect them even to somebody else that might have something in common. So if you meet a single mom, you say, you know what, we have an awesome single moms ministry at our church. Really? Or you find out, oh, they really love sports. Hey, we have upward basketball at our church. Your kid could be in that. Or, oh, I'm sorry about your spouse passing away. We have a grief ministry and love to help you with that. So learning a little bit more about them is going to increase the idea of connecting. But just a general like, well, come to our ministry is not going to do it. You've got to be more intentional. You got to go to the next step. And then what I like to do is I like to email them, or if they're on Facebook, I'll add them on Facebook, or just, again, that personal phone call that just says, hey, you are my server, or hey, I met you at the dry cleaner, or hey, our kids are in the same class and let's have a cup of coffee, and make that effort to get to know them, to build a friendship with them. That's that first one. That's the easy one. Well, easy for, I guess, some of us, but we all know people. Do you know that 80% of the people that end up coming to church, 80% of the people that end up getting saved are our friends, people that we already know? So be intentional. Start praying and saying, Lord, every day when I go out, every day, even in the midst of this and stuff that's going on, every day when I go out, whether it's my job or the grocery store or the dry cleaner or going to a lake or going hiking, Lord, who can you intercept me with that I can just at least say hello? And if the opportunity does come up that I can talk more, that I have information to give them and I'm ready and I'm prepared. Remember, you got to plan for success versus plan for failure. The next level of connecting is those that already are in your church. They come to your church, you see them in your church, they're sitting in the lobby, they're waiting to go into the sanctuary, and how can I connect to them? How do I talk to them? They're a new person. I've never seen them before. So what do I do? How do I even start a conversation? Are they already in a Sunday school class or already in a small group? I don't know. First thing to do is, one idea that I do is called Take 5. Take 5 minutes to talk to somebody you've never met before, or talk to 5 different people for 1 minute. Just go up to them and say, you know what, please forgive me if I've forgotten your name, but tell me how are you been coming to the church a long time, or how long have you been coming to the church? Better, open-ended question, or are you already in a Sunday school class or a small group? Finding out some things about them, because sometimes they're just standing there, it's their first time and no one's talking to them. Introduce yourself and ask them how long they've been coming, and this way it avoids being a little embarrassed in case they say, well, don't you know me? We dated last year. That's okay. That's funny, but it could happen. If they answer, this is my first time, take them to the Welcome Center and hang out with them to see if they need someone to walk them to service. If they're already a member, ask them which class or group they have that they're in, and why do they like it? Why are you in that particular person's class or small group? It's great information, because it's also going to get some information for your church to find out. They say, well, I'm in the Joneses class. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. Well, you know what? It's really, really crowded. There's never anywhere to sit. And I'm just thinking that they don't need me there. Well, come to our class. Or, I'm in this class and I'm really loving it. Well, how are you serving? Oh, we're not really serving yet. Why not? I always want to know that. Years ago, I was working at a church. I was attending a church, and I was a greeter, loved to greet. And in between services, I would go out into the lobby and I would just introduce myself to people because I had nothing to lose. And so I'd go up and just say, hi, my name is Kris, and tell me how long you've been coming to Hope. And they'd say, oh, a year, 6 months, first time, whatever. And the next question was always, well, tell me how you're serving. And once in a while, they'd say, oh, I greet, or on the third Sunday, I watch the 5-year-olds, or, whatever they do. But do you know that majority of the time, they're not doing nothing. So then I was like, so I would take them over to one of the desks of the people who the area they recruit, was like the, assimilation desk or whatever it was, but it was where you get information. And I would walk them over there and say, hi, this is Susie, Q, and Bob. And they've been coming here for a year, and they're not serving because they don't know what to do. I remember a pastor said to me, he saw me, he watched me one particular Sunday, and he says, how are you doing that? And I said, doing what? How are you? We've got more people than ever that are serving, like more than ever. How are you getting them to serve? We announce it from the pulpit. We put it in the bulletin. We put it on our website. Nobody's signing up. It's like, you got to beg people. And I said, I asked them. And he's like, what? I just asked them. Most people don't serve. Most people don't join or become a part of our Sunday school class or our small groups because no one's asked them. They're waiting for someone to want them. And we don't even realize that. We think it's their decision, but the reality is it's our decision to be intentional about inviting people by name with a personal connection to them and say, we'd love for you to be a part of our class or a small group or our ministry. Now, if you're doing a study online, you can also, the same process, you can still ask people how they're serving. You can still ask people how they serving in their existing church, or how things have changed since, maybe they're not in a physical group and they're only doing online, but it still works. Now, if they are a member of the church, but they're not in your class, I would suggest walking them to your class. I would suggest bringing them into your class. When you're walking them in, what a great time to ask them more questions about them. What a great time to ask them why they chose your church and to see what kind of answers they've given you. The more you know about your church, the more you know about your ministry and the other classes that are there, the other small groups that are there, what your church is doing, how they're serving in the community, what events they have going on, if there's a guest speaker. The more you know about your church, the better you are at being able to communicate that information and help somebody connect. But when you don't know anything, then why am I going to come to your church? Why do I come to your small group? So I challenge you to be prepared so that you're ready to give an answer, just like the word talks about. Of course, it's talking about spiritual answers of salvation, but I believe it's also talking about information about your church or ministry, because you need to be prepared to answer questions and to help somebody to connect. Try and get their info so you can follow up. So even if they don't end up in your class, even if they don't end up in your ministry, even if they don't end up in your Sunday school, you still have their information, and you might be able to even help them belong somewhere else. So we've talked about why people don't come back. We've talked about connecting outside the building, the church, in the community. We've talked about connecting them within the building. Now we're going to talk about connecting within your Sunday school class, in your small group, okay? I look at our time, make sure we're doing okay. So whether someone is new or a regular, this list is going to apply to both. So just kind of thinking in your mind, well, I have a ministry, we have a small group, we have a group that goes hiking, we have a group that meets on Sunday morning, we have a group that meets on Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't matter. This is going to be kind of a broad range. It's going to fit all areas, okay? First thing that's important is greeters. If you want your Sunday school small group to grow, you have got to have people greeting them, even if you're doing it online. You got to have people welcoming them in, just like Eileen was doing, just like I was doing when you guys came on. You've got to say their name if you can, and it makes them go, wow, like they said my name, and all of a sudden someone feels good and they feel like someone wants them to belong, someone wants them in the group. So acknowledging new people, saying we're so glad you're here. Hey, if you have any questions, sitting them down next to someone who's going to talk to them. Don't put them on the front row. Who the heck wants to be on the front row when you're new? Save those seats in the back. Leave some seats in the back for people who come in late that are nervous. But always want to sit them down next to somebody who's going to talk to them and find out more information. Get them a cup of coffee. Get them a muffin or whatever, but help them. It's really good also when the teacher comes up and says, hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm the teacher today. And they ask some open-ended questions as well. So you got to have greeters. The greeters usually know how the class is structured. They know information about the class. They know what activities are going on. They're the eyes and the ears of the class. So if they're not doing this, if the greeters don't know how to do this, then you probably need to train them better. You also need exit greeters. You need people who say goodbye, have a great day, or hey, can I walk you over to service? Or hey, a bunch of us are going to lunch afterwards. And again, you're trying to connect. Remember, the more places you touch, the higher chances that people come back. We're trying to find as many things we can in common with them. Oh, you have a kid? I have a kid. Oh, you're from the north side of town? I'm from the north side of town. Oh, you work at Walmart? I worked at a Walmart one time. And I'm just telling you, the more places we connect, even if some of those places disconnect, the higher the chances are that people will come back and they'll stay because they feel loved. They feel cared about. They feel someone's interested in them. Next is to have an icebreaker or a set time for everyone to meet each other. In my Zoom I do on Wednesday nights, we have a little 10-minute time where people kind of come in and go out. And then we have what's called an after chat, where afterwards people can just talk if they want to talk and get to know each other a little bit better and ask some additional questions. So you need to have that time as well to be intentional, to allow. Icebreakers allow people to safely connect with each other and not feel uncomfortable, especially male to female. And I have permission to go ask a guy what his favorite dessert is. I have permission to ask a girl, what's her favorite place to have a vacation. But maybe in other circumstances that would be weird or uncomfortable. So icebreakers are good to help people feel connected. Now, not everybody likes them. And I always have a rule. Listen, Out of every 30 people, there's at least 2 of you that hate them. So I tell you just to stay seated. Doesn't bother me a bit. But the other 28 of us really want to meet somebody new. We really want to get to know people in our class and find those things in common. Because during an icebreaker is sometimes when you find out, oh, you've been to Hawaii? I've always wanted to go. And you start a conversation. Oh my goodness, your kids play this sport, so does my kid. Oh my goodness, you're divorced? I'm divorced. And you have something in common. And again, that creates that connection. If you'd like I have on my website, I don't sell a lot of things on my website because I give 99% of my website. It's a gigantic website, the Wikipedia, called thesinglesnetwork.org on there. But I do sell about 200 icebreakers and small group exercises for like $5 on my site. And it's just to help, generate some income for the ministry. But if you would love that, please go to the website and order it. And I basically have been collecting them for years. I rewrite them to fit groups when you have the opposite sex because, some of those icebreakers do not work, if you know what I mean. Another thing, you want to offer refreshments, have name tags. First name, big. Last name, tiny. Use reusable, like where they slip in a little thing and they clip. I can't tell you how many ministries I go to, and they, half of them don't want to wear one because they don't get the purpose of the ministry. It's not about them. And that's a whole nother conversation. But the purpose of a name tag is for somebody who doesn't know you, to help them feel more comfortable when they do come in for the first time. And especially if you make reference to Bob and Sue, and Bob has got a name tag and Sue's got a name tag, then it helps me to connect. And the more people I connect, the higher the chances are that I'm going to come back. Have table discussion questions for the lesson. We don't need another sermon. We need times where we can ask questions. We can sit around a table and discuss what we just learned. Because again, the more information I find out, let's say the topic's on disappointment and we're sitting around talking about disappointment. And all of a sudden Bob says, well, I didn't understand what it is. I just lost my marriage after 30 years. And Joe's over here saying, I just lost my job. And all of a sudden you see a connection of grief and sadness and they connect. And that's where we're going to get the health, the growth, and the things that are going to keep people together and build the community of God. Encourage regulars to sit in different places. So talk to new people. Some people might not want to talk or share. It's okay. Leave them alone, but still follow up with them. Invite new people to lunch. Walk them to service. Ask them open-ended questions. Get their info personally. Add them to your Facebook page, your email list. Let them know of other things going on in the church. Be sure to learn about their lives, their families, major life changes, divorce, kids moving out, surgeries coming up, financial needs. The more we find out about each other, again, the higher the chance we're going to connect and the higher the chance we're going to stay connected. Remember, the more you know about a person, the more you'll connect, the more places, the more you have in common. This then what leads to keeping. So now we've talked about, I've met my neighbor again. We love to garden. We do roses. Hey, let's go to Lowe's and go buy some roses together. And we start a conversation about roses. Then I say, hey, Susie, would you like to come? I'd love for you to come to my church this Sunday. And I have this awesome small group that we have so much fun. And then she's like, sure. And she comes. And then 3 people call her on the phone and talk with her and chat with her or email or whatever. Next thing she knows, she's like, wow, this is awesome. People really care in your ministry. Next thing you know, it's like, hey, we're going to the Arboretum next week. You want to go? Because I know you like roses and I like roses. And you go and you find out and the layers get peeled back. And then you find out that Susie is really struggling with something and she needs a support group and she needs some friends. And that's when it happens, guys. That's when it happens. Acts 2:44-45 says, all the believers were together and they had everything in common. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to anyone as he had need. What I love about this scripture in Acts is that married or single, you looked around and you went, this person needs a car. This person needs gas money. This person needs groceries. This person needs just an arm around them that says, I love you. I know a lot of us are worried about the COVID going around or whatever, but I just feel led to hug people. If I feel led to hug, I hug them. I just feel like I want to do what Jesus would do. I got a brain in my head. I'm not being stupid, but if God says hug them, I hug them. That's where we are. Look into our Sunday school and our small groups. Do we really know the people that are there? Are we really helping? And I'm not talking about those that are there and again, that don't leave and you wish they would leave because all they do is sponge off of you. Their life never changes. You know, it's been months, it's been years, and they're in the same place. And I call them spinners. They just spin, 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 spin. They do the same thing. They never change. Wow, wow, wow. They wish their life would change, but wow. Let's not talk about them. I'm talking about those that want to change and they're hungry for the word of God and they're hungry for fellowship and they're hungry for support and they could turn out to be the most amazing leader one day. Just like you, maybe when it was your first time or you coming and you didn't know anybody, or maybe there was stuff going on in your life and you're so glad somebody reached out to you and listened to you. That's what I love about this verse is that nobody went without need. Everybody did whatever they took to build community and to help each other. I'm so thankful for the people that have helped me, that have blessed me, people that have come in and helped me. I have somebody that helped me get a car not too long ago that I needed. My car was like, we were laying hands on it just for me to get to the next intersection. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for people who call me and check on me and say, Kris, how are you doing? How's traveling going? How's the ministry going? We need each other, folks. This is going to help people belong when they feel like you care. Romans 12:5 says, so in Christ, we who are many form one body and each member belongs to all the others. Most churches encourage us to join. What's the difference between joining and belonging? Think about a necklace. Even think about this necklace that I'm wearing. I can join this necklace, kind of like this one. I can join it and I'm joined it, but I'm hanging off the end here. But only when you become a part of the necklace, one of these, do you belong? And so we spend so much time saying, join our church, join our ministry. Even I slip up and say that word sometimes. But joining does not mean you're included. Joining does not mean you're part of the group. Is the perception of your ministry a club? Is it a big clique, a big holy huddle? A holy huddle is where people are inward focused and they forget about those around them. They forget what it feels like to walk in for the first time. When people come into your groups, do you guys look like you're inwardly talking and I'm like looking like you're in a huddle? Or are you looking to me as I walk in? In the same way, in anything that we do out there and in our churches, do we look welcoming? Do we look like we care? So here's a few steps to remind you. Some may be duplicates of what I've said, but it's just a list of how do we help people belong so they stay, so they keep coming back. Not perfection, because people have junk, stuff's going on in their lives. Sometimes we mess up, we don't do a good job. Sometimes we didn't follow up like we should have. Sometimes people may misunderstood us and think that we weren't being nice, but we were. Or maybe we didn't give them the attention because they're going through something tough, or maybe it just was an off day for us. It's not perfect, but I think we could do a lot better if you follow these few tips. First one, be welcoming and inviting. It needs to feel good when people visit. They need to go, wow, this place is awesome. I really feel. Now, I'm not talking about 10 people like, hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? No, I'm not talking about that because that's overwhelming. But if somebody comes in, do you give them eye contact? Do you give them a handshake, a touch on the shoulder? We're so glad you're here. Come over here. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What brought you to our city? What brought you to our ministry? Be organized. My pet peeve is lack of organization in our ministries. Our leaders, our teachers, our volunteers, we all need to be trained. How in the world, I talked about this with starting a singles ministry. You want your Sunday school class, your ministry to look like an operating room. Everyone has a job. Everybody knows their job. Everybody knows what's to be expected of their job. Everybody's trained in their job, but everybody works together as a team and they work well together. So when somebody comes into your ministry, it needs to flow. Somebody grabs them at the front, get you a name tag. We find out some information about you. I'm going to walk you over to sit you down with somebody who knows you. That person's going to ask you more questions. We're going to hang out. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to enjoy ourselves. Then we're going to get up. We're going to maybe go eat afterwards. We're going to eat, or I'm going to invite you to come and hang out with us. It is just a smooth flow. We're going to get you the information you need about our ministry, help you in any way that we can. Organized makes people feel safe. Unorganized creates anxiety, especially when it looks like there's 10 chiefs and that's it. When it looks like there's 10 people running things and yet no one is doing anything, or the opposite, one person's running and the rest of them are just kind of sitting there. Another one, great follow-up. You got to have great follow-up for new and regular attendees. You got to have a really good system to make sure you're not 5 people calling the same person, but at the same time, are we calling them? I don't like the letters that we used to get. Remember those we used to get? You go to a church, they send you this formal letter, and you're like, I don't even think they knew who I was. I worked at a church once years ago that before you got home, they would call and leave a message on your machine. Of course, this is back when there were machines, but isn't that be cool that before somebody could even leave, you could text them and say, thanks for coming to our class. And they'd be like, wow, that is so cool. Or our regular attendees, letting them know we missed you. Thank you for coming. Don't assume because they are a regular attendee, you know them, that they still don't want to be acknowledged. They still don't want to be remembered and valued that they're there. Don't forget about those as well, because those are the ones that are serving. Those are the ones that are tithing. Those are the ones that are doing a lot of the work. But if we forget to also acknowledge when they're not there, we lose those. How are we going to get the rest of them? So follow up in your communication. A follow up is communicating you care about the person and their lives. You care about what you've heard them say. You care what they've shared. You care because Jesus cared. Make sure that you're willing in your follow up to meet them one-on-one. Hey, it was great having you in our class. Love to have coffee with you this week, or love to do a call with you and get to know you a little bit better. I'd like to hear your story. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. I think it's awesome. I think people feel loved and cared for. You have to kind of feel it out, because some are like, they kind of stand like this. Well, you know what? They're waiting to see if it's a place they want to join. You need to remember things that people have told you. If they've had kids, if they've been married, how they found out about your church. Again, so that you can remember to say it back to them. I once greeted with this older gentleman that used to have a notepad, and he would write down things about people because he couldn't remember. And then he'd say, as they were leaving the church, well, what did you think about that church? And what did your little boy, Tommy, think about the church? And people would be like, wow, he remembers. What I love about Facebook, guys, is that when you message somebody in Facebook, you can look at your thread and you can see other conversations that you might have had with them. And you could see that their mother was sick, or they're taking care of their child right now, or they lost their job. And then you could say, hey, how's the job hunting going? That makes people feel they belong because somebody cares. You need to connect them with others who might also have something in common with them. Try walking them to after service into their car and find out a little bit more information, that even though maybe you don't have everything in common with them, you know somebody else who does. And that also helps them. I'm a big networker, and I think networking people is amazing. But you got to make sure the person you're networking them with will also follow up. You need to connect them also to any programs in your church or events that are happening. Remember, you want to be sticky. You want them to be sticky. You want them to stick to things. And so connecting them to other people besides yourself and connecting them to an event or something's going on in your church increases the connection. And even if they disconnect from one, they're still connected to the other. It's awesome. Remember, when people feel loved and cared for, included, they'll begin to belong. Galatians 6:10 says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. So you say, okay, what about those who attend but aren't connecting? Kris, we've done everything. You know what? I've come around them. I've hugged them. I gave them a muffin. I gave them a cup of coffee. I talked about their mama. I talked about their kid. I gave them a couple bucks for gas, and they're still not consistent. They're not coming on a regular basis. They're surely not serving. They're not helping. They're not doing nothing. What do I do? Have you spent time with them personally? Is it just by email and a text? Have you actually made an effort to spend time and pick up the phone and say, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. I'd like to know about you. That's what I do when I work with Start Ministries, is I try to have coffee with everybody in the ministry at least once. Because what I want to do is I want to find out enough about them to see if I'm the person they're supposed to connect to, or is it somebody else? Now, realizing you can't be friends with everybody that you have coffee with. And if you're going to start new friendships, some friendships have to go. And I know that takes time. But if you're doing it for the purpose of seeing what God would want you to do, then it doesn't matter, because then God will manage to fit them in your life. But that initial conversation by Zoom or FaceTime or a cup of coffee in person is to simply get to know them better, but also to find out, why aren't they coming? What's going on in their life? Maybe you find out that they're taking care of their elderly mother, or maybe you find out they got hurt. Heaven forbid they got hurt. They don't want to come back to church. Wow, wow. I love those because they think church, I guess, is a bunch of perfect people. Anyway, but it is good to find out why. Why aren't they jumping in and helping? Why aren't they serving? Why do they think it's the responsibility of the same 3 or 4 people? A lot of times it's spiritual maturity is what you find out. Sometimes they need somebody to come beside them, somebody they need someone to show them how to do the work you're asking them to do. Years ago, I had a lady who was a problem in the ministry, and she complained all the time and cut down men and was an issue and had anger issues. And so I gave her 2 jobs to do. I had her come early to pray for the ministry ahead of time, and I also had her to clean up in between classrooms. And it changed her whole life because she had something to do. Again, it goes back to that asking. Remember that earlier? You got to ask them. And if they still say no, they say no, but at least we ask them. Be prepared to ask them why they aren't involved. Find out if you can help them to get connected. Maybe there is another area they could be better in. Maybe your class isn't the right class for them. Maybe whatever they're saying is the problem or the ministry you can fix or you can't. And it might be better to be somewhere else. I had to tell somebody that today. Somebody made a comment to me and said that there was something they didn't like or whatever. And I said, maybe we're just not the place for you. Maybe it'd be better for you to find another group. I don't think they wanted to hear that. I think they wanted me to go, oh, sure, let me just take this all about you and let me just fix everything for you. But I'm not that kind of person. I'll do the best I can to help. But there comes to a point to where some people's whining and complaining, they just like to whine and complain, or they're control freaks. Everything that I do in ministry, I answer to God, I answer to my board, and I answer to my team of leaders. And so decisions are made, most of them are made with that team involved. So to make a change for somebody just because of one person's thoughts or opinion, I can't do that. I wouldn't want to. I'd want to have a team that would help me. And that's part of the problem with our ministries and our Sunday school and our classes. We don't have a team. We got 1 or 2 people doing everything. We don't have a team. And you can't build a ministry, a healthy ministry, without a team where everybody knows their job. Everybody can train somebody to do their job. Everybody knows what's expected of their job. And that where you have a greeter and you have a person in charge of prayer in your Sunday school class, and you have a person in charge of marketing, someone's in charge of teaching, and we all work together because we all get that it's about Jesus, about bringing people to Jesus. We work well together as a team, but at the same time, I can greet if I have to, and I can teach if I have to. We can also not make it only about your job or my job, and so that relational part is there, but at the same time, we are structured. Jesus is about structure. He likes structure. He's not about just show up and whatever happens, happens. We're going to be organic. No, Jesus had structure. There's a reason for it. Organization, it's good. It's a good thing. But don't get too far the other way, because then it doesn't feel like you care or you're relational at all. I love to ask people. To help me right away. Anybody that's new, I'll say, hey, will you help me stack chairs? And they look at you like, sure. Hey, will you help me get the trash up? Okay. Sometimes they go, oh, I got to go. I go, okay, bye. Sometimes they go, well, sure. And I do that because I call it voluntelling. If some of you are watching this that know me really well, you've been voluntold probably. But I volunteer you because I want to see what you're going to do, because most of the time you're just wanting somebody to ask you, and you just want something to do because you like to serve. It feels good to serve. It feels good to help somebody. And I want to see what you're going to do, because if you do it once, you might do it again. And if you do it again, you might do it a third time. And then before you know it, I'm saying, hey, would you come every week and help us stack chairs? Would you come every week and help us clean up? And next thing you know it, they're part of the team and they belong to the ministry. The problem is we got a lot of people that do everything all the time, and we don't delegate, and we don't challenge anybody, and we don't ask other people to do it and involve them in the ministry of God. I'll ask them if they've ever taken a spiritual gift test. Do they know what their gifts and talents are? Do they know where their strengths are? Maybe that's why they're not involved. Maybe that's why they're not serving, because they really don't know what their area is. Do you ever pray with them? Prayer can create a better connection and accountability, and then follow up with them to see on things that you've talked about. Hey, we had a cup of coffee and we talked about how you can belong and how you can be more in class. You got to follow up. You can't just say, well, come and be a part of the class. No, you can say, hey, we'd love to have you as a greeter. Hey, we're having some greeter training in a couple of weeks. Love for you to be in that greeter training. Or, hey, we'd love for you to help be a table host and lead some discussion questions. We're going to have some training on that. Or are going to have a Zoom training or, whatever. But follow up with whatever conversation you had with them and why they're not there. Affirm positive behavior. When they do something good, say, thank you so much for greeting. That was an awesome question. Thank you for that input. Thank you for bringing that cake. Oh my gosh. Thank you for hugging that lady who smelled really bad. And Leah, here's the thing. If they're still not involved or continue to be sporadic in attendance, wait on God to release them from you and move on to others. 1 John 2:19 says they went out from us, but they never really belonged to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. But their going showed that none of them belonged to us. And so I say this to say that, there's people that we work really hard to help them to connect. We work really, really hard to help them belong. And it still doesn't seem to be a good fit. I wouldn't waste your time on them anymore. You can pray for them, but for the handful that are just there for the wrong reasons, there's a handful or 10 times more that just need your attention. Don't let the enemy distract you with those that are really not there to grow and not there to help your Sunday school class grow or your small group grow, but focus on the ones that, even though they might be a little weird or they're not there yet, or they need some training, or they're shy, or they're insecure, but there's potential. Remember the acronym, faithful, available, and teachable. Let's look for those faithful people. Let's look for those people that are available and they're teachable. And you'll see your whole ministry change. You'll see your whole Sunday school class grow, and it'll make a difference in the world. Thanks so much, guys, for listening. Thank you, Eileen, for allowing me to talk to everybody about contacting, connecting, and keeping to infinity and beyond.
Yes. And Kris, as you were talking, I got to thinking, at my church, we're not back in the building. How can we connect during these COVID times? What do we need to be doing?
Well, that's good that you asked that. And I was going to pull up my handout that I had on that, and it should have been right here. Here we go. So one of the things that I did as far as contacting people out, because I realized that we're not in the building, but connecting with people out in our community doesn't have to change. So even if your church is online right now, or you're doing a Zoom Bible study, you can still invite them to your Zoom Bible study. That part hasn't changed. Let me show you something that I bought online that has totally changed connecting. Now, wearing a mask out and about, people, you can't tell. You're like, looks like you're smiling, sort of, behind your mask, right? People can't see. You're like, I'm smiling, can't you tell? Okay, you can't tell. So nobody talks to anybody unless you need something off the top shelf. Nobody talks to anybody unless they're calling your name for the doctor's office. So I got one of these masks, okay? And so I started wearing this out, and I started smiling, and all of a sudden, everywhere I go, I get conversations. Everybody wants to talk to me. Everybody wants to know where I got it. And then they feel comfortable, and then they feel fun, and they feel like maybe we have a little normalcy. So I have found that one little thing that I did has made the biggest difference in the connecting, the part that's outside of my house. From there, you can start a conversation however way you want to, or still could be family, still could be friends. But then I would invite them to your Zoom and just say, here's the code. Then email them, text them, and say, hey, did you get the code? Are you going to be able to join us tonight? I'll look for you on the Zoom. They show up on the Zoom. You acknowledge them on the Zoom. You chat in the chat section. Hey, Susie, I'm so glad you joined us. Or what we do with my Zoom is I'll acknowledge every person on there. Hey, Joe. Hey, Bob. Hey, so glad to have you. So glad to have you. Oh, Sue, you're new. And then inevitably, the other person who invited them will say, yes, that's my friend, Sue. Or, yes, I invited Sue. I met her at the grocery store. And she's like, hey, I'll join your group. And so now we have 2 touches, 3 touches. Touched at the grocery store, touched and invited her, touched her when she saw her on the Zoom, and then I touched, which is the 4th one. Then they're going to go into small groups. We really encourage you to do breakout sessions because, again, right now we can't physically see each other in person. So having a breakout session is the 5th touch, and then having a prayer time for us is the 6th. And then we do after chat, which we allow people afterwards to just talk, that's like 7 touches. And I believe years ago, Eileen, wasn't there a book where a guy says you need 7 touches
At least.
to feel connected? So touching, I think he meant physically, but I think today it's just making a connection.
Right.
So I would say once you get them on the Zoom, it's the same thing. You're trying to find out things you have in common. You're trying to find out, how do we know each other? How can I help you? Last night on my Zoom, we had one gentleman put in the chat section. He says, I'm really struggling with isolation and depression. 3 people right away said, I'm going to call you. What's your phone number? I'm going to call you. And he felt comfortable to say, hey, I'm struggling. And people felt comfortable to say, I'm going to follow up. So that's very important. If your Zoom feels to where people feel comfortable enough that they can put those questions or privately text you and say, I'm really struggling, I have a prayer need. When they go into the breakouts, there's another level of chance that they can share. Again, the connecting is the same. The more places that I feel acknowledged and valued and included, the higher the chances I'm going to come back, the higher chances I'm going to get involved. And then when you're back in your building, you've added 5, 10, 20 people to your ministry. That's right. Just through Zoom. And here's one other thing, Eileen. What I'm doing next weekend, a week from Saturday, is I'm just doing a hike. So we just put the word out. We're going on a hike. Same thing. If you, depending on where you live and your state, your city, and your zones, if you can do some still activities, I would go, but meet outside and still have the social part of it. But it's all because of based on the foundation of the Word of God in Zoom. Then you see the fruit is the social time.
Awesome. Deborah had a question, and she said, how do we get those who are reluctant to grow relationships with others in the small group beyond the leader?
Yeah, because the leader is like, the doctor, the teacher, the lawyer. It's someone of authority, and it makes them feel, they're drawn to that person because that person's giving them a solution for their life right now. We're all drawn to people that we feel know what they're doing versus what we're doing. You have to be intentional about finding out enough about them. You have to ask people in your group to contact them directly. So if you've got a lady, Julie, and you're like, Julie, I want you to call Susie, and I want you to ask her to coffee. And then so you have to get people to intentionally, that's where you have leaders. And so your leaders' jobs are to then follow up with the people in the group and call them and have coffee or chat with them or text with them and to build relationships. You just have to, and so like if I wasn't, this is something else too I do, Eileen. So on the chat, or on the, if you have everybody in Zoom or everybody in your living room, either way, is you might say, well, Joe, that's a good question. Eileen, I believe, has got some background in that. Or, Joe, that's a great situation. Hey, Wes is also a single dad. I think he could probably help you. You guys need to talk.
Yeah.
And that's what I do but I had to know enough about Wes. I have to know enough about Joe to be able to create the connection. So I put it on them, hoping that they will. But that's it. Does that help, Deborah? I don't know if that helps you or not. You can let Eileen know that answers your question.
She also had another question, and this may be something that you're going to address on Saturday, but should there be certain criteria for those who are small group leaders, who lead the small group? So I'm not sure if she means like at the table talk or like leading the Bible study.
I don't know either. So say the question again.
Should there be a criteria for those who lead small groups? Some kind of prerequisite?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for someone to be a teacher, obviously, right? I mean, if you're a teacher, you definitely have to make sure that you guys believe spiritually the same thing and their ability to teach. But teaching's also there. I love to train people to be teachers by having them facilitate. So I start them off with facilitating. Actually, I even go further back, Eileen. I will have them share a 10-minute testimonial. And then I'll have them, go to a 20-minute testimonial. And then I might have them facilitate the leader, the teaching. And then I have them actually become the teacher. And then we might multiply and multiply into another group. So that would be obviously that they can teach, they can follow up, they have good eye contact, they can carry and through the message through. So, I'm looking for someone that I'm going to mentor underneath me to then maybe multiply and build and have their own ministry. But I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Deborah, or are you talking about somebody that's leading a ministry but not the teacher? Because there's two things in like Sunday school and small group ministry. Sometimes we have teachers that are just really good at teaching, but they're terrible leaders. Okay, they're not really a leader. They're there just to teach, and they love to teach. You can tell because they're history buffs. And then they go away. And we never see them again. And they never come to our gatherings. They never make phone calls. They're just teachers. And then you have what's called directors. So directors actually direct the ministry, they direct the small group, and they build the team. So they're going to have the prayer leader, they're going to have the greeter, they're going to have the hospitality, they're going to have the marketing. They serve underneath them, and it's the director's job, preferably male and female, to build the team, to help train the team, and to help each team build their team. So you need more than one greeter if you're going to have 25 people in Sunday school. You're going to need more than one prayer leader. And so that person as a director probably was in charge of prayer at one time, was in charge of marketing at one time. And you saw that they had an incredible gift of management, that incredible gift of leadership. And then that's when you say, wow, you guys would make a great director. But I like co-directors because life happens. And you don't want to ever have it on one person. And typically their skill set's different too. You might have an extrovert and an introvert, high admin, more relational, and they make a really good team. Is that what she was wanting?
Deborah, we'll see if she hasn't posted any other clarification. Co-lead, she said, is another great answer to help.
Yeah. This is, I'll tell you something we learned. Some of you guys know that you're watching this. We have our big retreat, LaborDaySingles.org, that got canceled this year. Broke my heart in a million pieces. But we have an incredible team of people. Well, about 2 years ago, literally 3 days before our retreat started, and it's 200 people. It takes all year to plan this retreat. 3 days before the retreat, the lady in charge of all of our volunteers quit and left us in a really big mess. And so what did we learn from this? Every position had to have a co-leader from that point on. And because life does happen. And what happened is I had to scramble, and I had to get some other leaders to scramble. And I'm the teacher, and I've got to teach and run the ministry. It's too hard to do. So we learned from that point on that we would never, ever, ever have any positions in our ministry without a co-leader as well as a team.
Right.
And then from that team is where you get your next leaders, you see. And then eventually somebody could be, you could have directors over the whole thing. But we also have job descriptions. We started writing job descriptions. Even though our event's only once a year, we still felt that we needed to have something on writing, that if people who ended up serving, we'd have something to give them. Even if they read it and go, I can't do all this, or I don't agree with all this, or I don't feel led to do all this. Fine. What would you put on there? And if they write it, then it creates an ownership from them when they've written part of their own job description. But yeah, definitely co-lead. So the first one is connect people together, give them the responsibility to talk to each other. You know about them and you connect them. Follow up and see if they did connect. Remember, you got to follow up. And then the other one is looking for that person. And here's the thing, y'all. In Sunday school and in our small groups, not all of them are perfect. Some classes, you have 100 people in a class. Like at my church, we have some classes that are 100 in size because the teaching is phenomenal. But the reason why they're 100 in size is because there's also really good follow-up. There's also somebody who, hey, how you doing? We haven't seen you. Hey, you want some snacks? Hey, can you help us do this? Hey, can you help us do that? So teaching is wonderful, but if people are going to really feel that it's somewhere where I can belong and I want to serve, you have to have the other part. So without someone in charge of the food and someone in charge of prayer and all that, working together as a team, the class can't grow. It's just going to be one person at the front teaching, and then people will come in and out all the time. They'll come in and out, and they won't belong. They'll just be, like a herd of cattle in and out.
Right.
So
those are the questions. I have another one. We're horrible at follow-up. So is there a simple system to use? You know, like you said earlier, you didn't want 12 people contacting one and nobody contacting number two visitor.
Yeah.
How do you keep records of that? I know you are great at organizing.
Well, the old fashioned way, some classes are still doing, the 3-part, sign up sheets. Somebody comes in and they sign up on a sheet and there's 3 parts, and one goes to the office and one goes to the teacher and one goes to the follow-up team. You can still do that. You can have or sign up, clipboard, or you can still do it through the computer. Everybody comes in and there's an iPad and people check in. But the thing is, it has to be a dedicated team. There's got to be people that's what they do. There's 3 people and their job is to follow up, guy to guy, girl to girl, whatever. But develop a structure that is consistent. It's not all in one person. And then you keep notes. Okay. Now, if you're on staff, you can keep notes in the back end of was ACS or, one of those programs, right? You can put in there like, oh, I called Susie. She right now is just filed bankruptcy and she's got cancer, and you don't want anybody to know all that. Okay. So on staff, you have access to those records, and other staff people do too. But if it's volunteer, what do? So I would say you'd sign a confidentiality agreement among that team in which you would keep information private. You follow up and you keep notes. So I build websites as well. I do some marketing and advertising on the site, and I would build websites for different churches where, or I would suggest a private page on the site where people who were in charge of follow-up would go to that page, and they would have a list of all the people in the classes, and they could put notes in and say, I called Susie today. She wasn't home. Then it's Bob's turn. Bob called Susie and they talked on the phone. Then it's Joan's turn. Joan sent her a personal note and she responded back. So that way we're kind of like, we're all taking turns, but I can also see what we did. So in the old days, it was all paper, but today we're digital. And so keeping track, and then also, what do they say back? So if Susie's like, right now I'm looking for a job, and she tells everybody, well, then great. We all know she's looking for a job. But if she says, I'm really struggling financially, and it's not something everybody needs to know, but those follow-up people need to know, so that when the second person calls and says, how are things going? Were you able to get some support, or were you able to go to church? That person knows, and then they're not having to say their whole story again to a second follow-up person.
That's very good.
Because the goal here is not to be getting people's junk. The goal here is to connect to them, to help them belong, to help them know somebody's listening. But I like notes, and especially if they're weird, I like notes. I like it when they go, this guy said some weird things, or this girl is, oh my goodness, she's a little nuts. I want to know that before I contact them. I want to know if it's somebody I safely would feel comfortable talking on the phone or FaceTiming. But I would just keep a group small, but it needs to be enough people. And it's consistent, and that's their job. Understand, Eileen, a few years ago, I learned a ton about it. So this is a guy named Furman Brandon and his wife, Catherine. So 30 years, 25, 70 years ago, I belonged to this church, and he greeted unofficially, no greeting team, and his wife followed up, no follow-up team. They got tired of nobody greeting and nobody following up, so they just created it. And I met them, and I said, where's the committee? Because, we're Baptists. Where's the committee? And they said, there is no committee. We didn't ask permission. We're just doing it. So I said, well, can I greet? And he said, yep, get the young ones, get the women. I'll get the old ones and the men. And we greeted for 7 years, and we developed the entire first impression ministry of the church. We trained up people to know, how do you properly greet? What is the process? What does it look like? Then, okay, they fill out the little piece of paper in Sunday school, or they fill it out in church, or they don't fill out anything, but you don't recognize them. They're somebody you don't know. We would find out their information. He would write it on a little notepad, and he would call them himself way before the church ever got to them. Because the church was like, well, we sent out a letter, then we wait, and then, 3 weeks later, the person's gone somewhere else. So Catherine, we would literally take a stack of sheets that people filled out, and we would physically, on Sunday afternoon, go to their homes. Now, today, people are like, don't be coming to my house. I don't know you. It's the same thing. We're trying to connect with them. So as quickly as possible to follow up with those new people by texting them. by picking up the phone, calling them. I think now everybody's about texting to say, hey, we loved having you in the class. It was great to hear about your son. That was really funny what you said. That shirt was beautiful, girl. I need to know where you bought that shirt. That is going to make the hugest difference in their life. But that means you have to care, right, Eileen?
Exactly. Kris, the thing I think about when you were talking about that connecting, many, many, many years ago, early in my first teaching job, just out of college, I moved to a new location and I went to church on Sunday night. I didn't go Sunday morning. I did go Sunday morning. And I went to a singles. This was when singles was just starting. This would be 1975, 76. I'm old. That afternoon, the directors, it was a married couple, came to visit me. I had no furniture in my house. I had a dining room table, or a card table, I think it was. We sat on the floor. They were an older couple. He was retired, and they just acted like that was the most normal thing in the world. Well, I went back that night and joined the church.
Yep.
I mean, I just felt like there was a connection. So it is so important for
I just want somebody to acknowledge that they even saw me. They even acknowledged that I was there, or even want to ask me, tell me more about yourself. Tell me your story. I remember the old days people did a pounding, and definitely aging myself, where somebody that was new, you would give them a pound of sugar and a pound of flour. But what does that look like today? The first time I joined that church that I was just talking about, I joined the choir because that's where all the gossip is, if there is any. And a lady turned to me and she said, hey, it's so nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here. And I'm thinking, she called me by name. Hi, Kris, it's nice to meet you. Glad you're here. And I'm like, this is going to be my church. Yeah. Because I'd gone all out of other churches and nobody even knew I'd noticed me. So if we know what it feels like to be ignored and not loved, understand, as singles, just in general, we're already feeling that way. So let's not be a part of this problem. Let's be a part of the solution, and not make it about our singleness. Make it about Jesus. Make it about people who need to hear from God. I talked about this the other night. I talked about this last night in my Zoom study. Unless even if you die when your spouse dies, if you're a married person, you're still going to go before Jesus by yourself. And so to me, it's like, I just want to reach people for the Lord, to build the kingdom, to build the whole kingdom. And so think of creatively, think of what would people like today. Now, some of you who are watching this know that I message people on Facebook. I message 200 to 300 people a week on Facebook. And I'll go, are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? And then I look in the thread and go, oh, how's your mom? Oh, how's your dog? How's your job? And I do this because this is my way of connecting with people. I feel that it helps me to stay connected to them, to remember, oh, God, I forgot to pray about her job. Oh, I forgot to pray about her mom. And it helps me to remember. What kills me is when people are not on Facebook. When they're like, just text me or just email me. And I got to remember those to email, because I don't, it's easier just to have you all on Facebook. But I think that makes a difference, Eileen.
Yeah. In
just the connecting. But you have to be intentional. You have to do it every week. You can't do it once every 3 months and go, I've done my part.
That is the key. Intentionality for sure. I don't see any other questions that have been listed. We're so glad that you participated in this Zoom call, and know that we'll be here bright and early for me on a Saturday morning at 8:30. I may still be in pajamas and have a cup of coffee. But Karina, girl, it'll be in the afternoon. You'll be doing better. I hope you can go to bed in just a few minutes. And we appreciate you joining with us. And we appreciate all of you being here today. Names I see are Deborah, Lorianne, Pamela, and Pat. Thank you so much for being on. Doug and Lori have been in the background. They also work with young adults. And so we're just glad that they're there. And
one thing I'd ask everybody too is, once this does code to permanently on the website, is to just let other people know about it. Get the information to them, duplicate it, or have your team sit down, your class sit down and watch it together. And most of you know how to find me. You can email me. You can say, Kris, we're gonna watch your video on Zoom. We're gonna share the screen. We're gonna watch your video on Zoom. Would you be able to be a part of our Zoom meeting and then answer any more questions or help us? I would love to do that. So just let me know.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, let me pray and we'll conclude for tonight. Lord, I just thank you for this time. I thank you for Kris and for her wisdom, her insight, her enthusiasm as she leads us, Father. You can tell that you have placed a call on her life and that you have anointed her in this ministry. Father, as we digest this information, may we just think of ways individually, each of us can do a part of this ministry and gather others to join us in as we do that ministry. Thank you, Father, for loving us. I pray that we have a good night's rest tonight, wake restored and energized to serve you tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen.